Well, hello everyone. My name is Tina Judkins. This is my first presentation, so I'm nervous about it. Little things about me is that I grew up in the city of Louisville. I graduated from Sullivan College of Technology and Design with an associate's degree in computer graphics design, which is how I got my start in tech. Um, as far as coding goes, I went to the Code Louisville cohort with JCTC. I graduated from there in May with a concentration in JavaScript. I own my own freelance business called Marie Designs, where I do custom logos and custom apparel. And I just started my podcast called the Why Not Start Now podcast back in April. That's podcast really based on trying to get people unstuck and pursue their dreams in life. And my talk today is going to be about diversity and inclusion in the tech space. See if I can get it to click the right way. Diversity, equality, and inclusion is a lot that we've been hearing that a lot here lately. And I started to cancel this talk because I felt like with the climate of everything that was going on in the world, that I didn't know how people would accept it, but I'm glad I went ahead and started anyways. I didn't know how this was going to be set up. I really wanted to be like a conversation piece. I didn't want to just throw a bunch of statistics at everyone because we already know that all the numbers are pretty low on people of color, people of different backgrounds being in the tech industry. So if you have a comment or a question, feel free to ask and I'll bring it up in the chat, I guess. Is how we have to do it. But diversity is important because if we don't have people who look like everyone being represented, then a lot of times we fall under the radar, whether that's in gaming, whether that's in virtual reality with augmented reality or anything like that. It's important to have a diverse group of people working on different coding things. One of the things where I see that we're low representation is in gaming and also with the new technology with facial recognition. If I'm not the one or if nobody like me is behind that code stack, then like I said earlier, we fall on the radar. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't cancel too, Rebecca. I think it's still needed to be talked about. And like I said, if anytime somebody wants to mention something or jump into the conversation, please do so, because I don't really have a lot of statistics because we already know the statistics. But having a diverse team of developers will just push any organization forward. Whether you have more women, people from the LGBTQ community, people who look like me, white women, Asian women, we all need to be represented because we all use this technology. And if we don't see ourselves, then how are we supposed to be able to get the most out of it? Or how is anybody supposed to really feel connected to the technology that they're using? Sorry if I'm rambling. Like I said, this is my first one, so I'm kind of nervous. But does anybody have anything to share with diversity or what they go through on the day-to-day basis with it? I'll wait a few seconds to see if anybody says anything. Equality, we all same thing. We all wanted to be treated fairly when we go into these different spaces. Don't assume that we're just diversity hires when you see somebody who doesn't normally look like you. We all put in our hard work. We all like technology. We're all introverts for the most part. Some of us are at least. And we just want to be treated fairly on all aspects of the job. We want to be heard because we're good developers, not just because we're a woman or just because you look like me. We put in the same time and effort as everybody else, and we just want our just due. It's the same thing as far as pay. And like I was saying on the other slide, representation matters. If I'm a young child and I don't see anybody like me in the space, I'm gonna assume that this career path is not for me, which it is. It's for everybody because we all use technology. So representation matters on all forms, whether it's speaking like today, whether it's being in the classroom, being taught. We should be able to have teachers who look like us, instructors who look like us. We should be able to, every school district should have some type of coding involved in it. It shouldn't just go to a certain group of people because that too is assumed to be in the space. I started writing my first line of code at the age of 28. I didn't even realize it was something that anybody could jump into. And my daughter, since I'm doing it, she wrote her first line of code at 7. So representation matters, equality matters. We should all have access to the same programmings, and everybody can't afford to go to college. People of color graduate with a whole lot higher debt for different reasons. So with things like Code Louisville or General Assembly that offers coding, a lot of people don't know about it because they don't feel like it's offered to them. So equality matters, being paid fairly, we put in the same time and effort, we should be able to pay. We shouldn't have to get less pay just because of the way we look. We have no control over the way we look, so we should all be able to have equal pay. Does anybody want to comment on equality in the workspace or anything? You can feel free to add a comment or a question at any given time. To go back to assuming people are just diversity hires, it kind of takes away from the work that we put in. We're already nervous on the job front. We're already suffering with imposter syndrome. So to be diminished as a diversity hire, it just adds to the stress unnecessarily. If we're all just looked at as a person and not anything else, or as a developer, that will make things go a lot better as we move through our careers. Women tend to quit tech jobs at a higher rate than men for a bunch of different reasons. A lot of it's because we're unheard. We don't feel like we matter in some of the spaces. We don't feel like we're being treated fair. We don't feel like our ideas are heard unless it comes from one of our male counterparts, which isn't okay, as we all know. So if you are in a space and you see different people, just treat everybody fairly. Just treat everybody with the same respect that you want to be treated as. Ask questions. We all need help at any given time. So we should feel like we should be able to go to our coworkers or anything like that. You see, there's some kind of the next year. I'm not sure what you mean by WFH. Perry, is that how you pronounce your name? Perry? But yeah, we've been hearing a lot that companies need to do better, but we're not really seeing exactly what they're doing better yet. You know, we as developers, we try to find solutions to the problems, which is why I didn't want to really bombard everybody with a lot of statistics today. I changed this program or my presentation a few times over the past few months because I didn't want to keep going over the same numbers that we already know as far as the low diversity hires. But when people say that we're doing better, like, okay, work from home. But like, how are we doing better? Like, what are companies really trying to do to outreach to diverse groups of people? Because if you bring somebody in who doesn't look like the group of people you're trying to attach, that's really not going to fix the problem. If you're in a room full of people and everybody looks like you know that you have a diversity problem. Regardless if it's everybody in the room and everybody looks like me, we have a diversity problem. If you're a white male and everybody in the room looks like you, and you bring aboard another white male to talk about equality, that's not really going to solve the problem. You got to bring in a bunch of different people to really get to the problem, how you can get different talent in, because there's all different types of talent from all different walks of life in this tech space. Regardless of education levels, there's talent out there. You just have to be willing to take a chance on people and get to know people, because if this pandemic has taught us anything, we're all more alike than we are different. We just have to get out of our comfort zones and really talk to one another in order to be able to get true equality on all fronts. Yeah, showing the numbers do bring accountability. Like I know Microsoft, Facebook, and most of the big tech companies over the past couple of years has less than 1% increase in diversity hires, and for women of color, it's even lower. I know Hispanics are a little bit higher, but just women of color, just anybody outside of white males and Asians is like less than 1%. We should not in 2020 be in a workforce and have 12 people on the team. There's only one female, there's only one black person, or there's only one member from the LGBTQ community. Like, there's plenty of talent out there that you don't have to keep going to the same group of people in order to get what you would so-called call a good developer, because you don't know who else is out there if you don't really try to find anybody else. I know that a lot of tech startups that are led by women don't really get a lot of funding, even though there's enough funding out there for a big pool of funding for everybody to get funded. It still only goes to a select group of people. And again, if you keep going to the same group of people, you're going to get the same results, which is catering to Asian men and white men, which they're not the only people who use technology. Even in gaming, the only time you really see fair equality in gaming that represents everybody is in sports. Once you get outside of the sports front, you really don't see everybody. Like, we all like to play fantasy games. If I could have a fantasy pet, mine would be a dragon. But if I play any of the fantasy games, I'm hardly ever represented. And it's like, why not? And that's because most of the game developers don't look like me. So they don't think to put in the characters that look like me. I don't think most of it's not being done maliciously. You just go by what you know and who you see mostly. There's a few comments I'm gonna read through. As far as like particularly negative experiences, people just assume that I don't have a lot in common with them, or people just assume that I haven't done my just due. Like I said, I went to Sullivan Sullivan Tech to get my degree. So even though my degree is not per se in developing, I still went through that college experience. I still have some of the education, but just people just assuming that I'm a diversity hire, or I mean, I'm not in the tech space yet, but even where I currently work at, people just assuming that I'm a diversity hire, or asking to touch my hair, or just certain things like that is really things. Don't ask me a question that you wouldn't want somebody to ask of you, or I don't know. It's just have a conversation with people. Not enough people want to have a conversation with you. I can say good morning to somebody and they'll look at me like I'm crazy, like I should be talking to them. And if I'm not comfortable enough to say good morning to you, how can I come to you and ask you for help if I'm confused on something, or if I'm not sure on how to do something with the company? So I feel like I'm glad that you're more part of teams, Brandon, that has had more diversity. I think it's going to continue to change over the next few years, but it's just not there yet. But I think more companies are looking more into women and more into diverse backgrounds, which is a great thing. Like everything else, we just have a long road to go. But I don't know. It's just a lot of offhanded jokes that people don't realize that are, I don't know, a lot of the things that people don't really realize what they're saying. I'm not saying that everybody should be cautious of everything that they say, but just because I'm a Black woman, don't just assume I only listen to hip hop, or I only listen to certain types of R&B in high school. I've always been a bit of like an oddball. Like, I played the violin. I listen to Green Day as much as I listen to Jay-Z. So mostly it's just the conversations, like have real conversations where you're actually listening to somebody, I think can change a lot. Instead of just assuming that you know somebody, just really go through and have a conversation with somebody and listen to somebody from a different background than what you're used to. And read some more of the comments. Yeah, there are a lot of talent pools being pulled from the HBCUs. It's for the historical Black colleges and universities, Brendan. But admitting that you didn't know that, that's even a big step, because a lot of people don't want to admit the things that they don't know. And that's on every front. Like, we have to admit the things that we don't know in order to learn. Inclusion is another thing. Just because we're in the build doesn't mean we feel included in things. It's a meeting. You should listen to everybody's idea. Don't just wait to somebody who looks like you or who you feel is more confident about speaking on somebody to hear what their ideas has to say. Everybody has a different experience to share, and inclusion can mean anything from having somebody into a conversation, seeing how somebody else can make a project better, how somebody else can make the workforce better. Don't just feel like somebody's not going to fit the company culture because they don't look like the regular company culture. You don't know who a person is until you really get to sit back and work with them for a few weeks or a few days. Going by an interview, a lot of people are nervous in the interview. You don't really get the full person in the interview. And a lot of recruiters, they're not a part of the company culture, but that's where you stop at when you're going on these jobs. They feel like you're not going to be a good fit into the company culture, but they don't really know until you're really inside the building, until you're really having these conversations with people, until you're really starting to work with people. One way that I'm getting out of my comfort zone when we could go around other people's, go to different meetup groups, be a part of different organizations. As a graphics designer, normally Louisville Design Week will be coming up. I started going to that a couple of years ago, and that's how I was able to just get out of my comfort zone and really get into the field on different levels and really start talking with different people. But some other ways you can do that is just to ask questions, come up to people and just start having conversations with them when you see them around. Don't just say we need to do better, but really do better. If you are part of a hiring team, or if you do hear things, off-color jokes, or if you hear somebody else going through a struggle, don't just ignore it or assume just because you feel like you don't see it fixes the problem, because it really doesn't. We live in a world where you can't not see color. Unfortunately, that precedes myself. Like, when people see the color of my skin, they just come up with a bunch of assumptions, which isn't okay. You should just assume stuff about people. You got to have a conversation with them. You got to get to know them. You got to see how you can make them feel more comfortable and vice versa. And that's how inclusion matters. That's why inclusion matters on all fronts. Just listen to people, ask questions, get to know them. What space you take? Yeah, I agree, Amanda. We should be able to open up a space for more conversations at the table, because that's how everybody's going to be fairly represented. Like, I can't come up with anything except from my point of view if I don't have a conversation with somebody. If I don't invite somebody else into the conversation and really see how a white woman perceives something, or how an Asian, I'll never know. Like, I can't just sit back and assume and not have these conversations with people. We all have things that we want to say. We all have things that have to be included with everything. Local talent, they can tap into the local talent pools, whether it's the local high school, the seniors that's graduating, just pull from a different group of people. Yeah, African Americans make up 14% of America in the U.S., which means that we should still have more than less than 1% representation in these companies. I don't know what the problem is for the big companies. They keep saying that the talent pool isn't there, but there are talent pools there. There are a lot of people of color. There's different groups for women. Like there's women who code, girl who code groups. They can reach out to those organizations and see what type of talent pool that they have and really listen to the talent pool, really take a chance on them, not just go to it and interview a couple people just to fix their numbers to say, oh, well, we tried, but we didn't find anybody. Like, why aren't you finding people? Why not set up different types of talent pools to see what you can pull from? Set up different think tanks to see how come these people aren't coming into the companies. And when they do come into the companies, why aren't they feeling comfortable? Why are they still feeling like we are unheard? Why are we still feeling like we're not welcome when we do get into these companies? Why is it still an all boys club at some of these bigger companies? If you are the CEO, if you're on the hiring board, you know you have a toxic environment. We have to go through the steps to fix that. Like it starts at every level. You can't just hire people and then come into a toxic work environment. If you know your work environment is toxic, you don't just fire people per se, but you figure out a way to make it work. Yeah, thinking local won't always fix the company's issue. Like this is something that has to be taking place on every level, from the corporate level all the way down. We have to we just have to fix things. We have to open up more conversations, have more uncomfortable conversations. I think that's the biggest problem, that people don't want to have uncomfortable conversations, which is what I wanted this talk to be today. I thought we'd be able to hear each other. I guess if we were live, it would have been a better conversations to have with people. But it's time that we start having the uncomfortable conversations and really start listening to people. Because, I mean, there's just too much talent out there for it still to only be predominantly white or predominantly Asian developers. Or to feel, when a woman or somebody else goes into these companies, to not feel truly comfortable. Like, we should all feel comfortable in any workspace that we go into. We shouldn't have to worry if our hair is not the right way, or our clothes isn't the right way, or the way we talk isn't the right way. We shouldn't have to worry about being our truest self when we go to work. Everybody should be able to be their truest self and have the freedom of speech and the freedom to talk the way we want to, or just feel accepted. And a lot of times that's not the case, because the company culture is only supposed to look a certain way. The company representation is only supposed to look a certain way. So even if you are a developer of color, you probably won't be seen, or you probably won't get the just due or credit that you get simply because you are a person of color. And that may diminish the brand for whatever reason, which is insane, because we use these products just as much as anybody else. So companies just have to do better on every level. There should be more people of color. There should be more women in these top roles. Statistics show that a woman-led company has more, just as much as profitability as a man-led company. Teams that have diverse people on board, sharing different ideas. So not all the time, but most times, a company that has a diverse group of developers have more success than people who don't. When you do have diverse people, that's when you don't have mistakes. Like Gucci did a few years ago, I guess a year or two ago, they did the blackface campaign. If you had people of color, you would have realized why blackface isn't acceptable, why it's not okay, why it's not just satire. So if you don't have a lot of people on your board on every step of the design process, then a lot of things are going to fly under the radar. You're not going to understand what's offensive if you don't talk to people. Even if you don't per se have somebody of color or somebody background on the development team, you can still have panels to discuss each step of the design process. Like, hey, is this okay? Or how will this affect this community? How will that affect that community? You should just assume when we have a whole world of people out here that you can just talk to and have conversations with. I think the biggest thing is once we get over the uncomfortableness of these conversations, things can start to change. But if we can't have these conversations freely, nothing else is ever going to change, because people are always going to feel too uncomfortable or they don't want to offend. But after the initial shock of the start of these conversations is when things can really change. I don't really have much else. Like I said, I didn't really know how to present this talk because of the climate of today, of everything that's going on. We've heard these words a lot, but I feel like I don't want these words of like diversity, inclusion, and representation and equality just to become buzzwords. These are very powerful words, which is why I chose for my presentation. And we got to start holding these companies and hiring managers accountable to include everybody. Like, it's changing, but it's not changing quick enough when it should, because there's plenty of people waiting to get jobs, waiting for an opportunity, who's not being able to get that because they're getting shut out before they can even get their portfolio shown, or before they can even get to the whiteboard interview or the tech interview. People are just assuming that they don't know enough, or they're not going to be a good fit for the company, when all you have to do is have a simple conversation with somebody. This is the end of my. I really want this to be more of a conversation piece that we have with one another. You can reach me on LinkedIn. Right, my LinkedIn information is up there, and on Instagram and Facebook. But at this time, I just want to open up the floor for anybody who wants to say anything else. I know there's been a few people in the comments having conversations, but has anybody come across like an awkward conversation that they want to share their experience with, or any ideas on how to make things better where you currently work at, or anything that you want to talk about?
Hey, Tina.
Hey, Amanda, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. Thank you for doing this talk today. It's also something that I'm quite passionate about too. Something that we've done in the place where I work is I lead a roundtable called Courageous Conversations. And we have these talks. We have these roundtables talking about diversity and inclusion and equity because they're uncomfortable. And so instead of calling them uncomfortable, we call them courageous, because it takes a certain amount of courage to stand up and say, hey, I don't understand this, or I don't know, or any of this. And so some of the things we talk about are, we've taken it upon ourselves. I'm on the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Council as well. We talk about how we change our recruiting. How do we change how we recruit people into our company? We've had discussions with our COO about the fact that there's no women on our board. We've had very frank conversations. So I thank you for getting up and putting these words in front of everyone, and making sure it gives people a tangible something to hold on to, that's more than just an idea of something we need to do better, but this is like, we really do. And so join conversations, put yourself out there. That's kind of one of what I said in the chat there was, understand, for people that are looking for something to do, understand the space you take up, and allow space for others. There's more voices.
Mm-hmm.
So, and something else that I've talked about is, if you're the only something, you're the only in order to be a voice to bring more. So, if you find yourself in the only, be that voice, be the cheerleader to bring in more people. I agree. Yeah.
When y'all do have these conversations, like as far as like how to bring in more people or how to change your recruiting process, does anybody actually come up with any solutions to actually change it? Like, has anything changed yet, or is it still going through like the talk process, or how's that going?
They've actually put in some ideas in place and working with our HR recruiters in order to look at a more broad spectrum of where do we get our talent pool from. Okay. So we open it up a little bit more, and we look for, we don't just try to shoehorn everybody into this one one space. They're consciously more aware of who we're talking to.
Yeah, because even with the algorithms, like that's against people of color or people who's not regularly from these backgrounds. So even if, you know, we go off algorithms or if we're just going off these new computer programs, a lot of resumes are going to get knocked out because they don't have those buzzwords on them. So go by the algorithms, even though it's supposed to be less stuff, even though it's supposed to take out the human factor and you're just supposed to be able to look at somebody's resume. A lot of resumes aren't getting seen; they're getting put out the pool before. So it's looking like there's nobody of color, there's nobody from different backgrounds applying. When the case is that we're just getting knocked out before we have a chance to show what we have to offer. So I'm glad that you are going through a different recruitment process. That's a good step in the right direction. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm with you. Though having an algorithm that just reads a resume does nothing for anyone. You're missing a talent pool that exists out there.
Yeah, because I mean these things are so layered. It's like even with the resumes, like a lot of people don't know. From like 10, 20 years ago, you could just have one resume that blankets everything, but now you have to have it tailored to the exact job. But if you're not going through these career development processes, you have no clue. You think resume, I typed it up, I got somebody who's a resume writer to write it for me, I'm good to go. Well, you're not, because you have to put in these different buzzwords. You have to make it tailored for whatever job you're going through. But a lot of people don't know that because they don't have the tools to go through these different professional development courses. So, yeah.
Right, absolutely.
I have conversations, though. I like courageous conversations. That's pretty neat. I like that.
Yeah. We thought it was a really, it gave something to it, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It takes a bit of the edge off of being uncomfortable. Like you said, just get behind and being courageous. So.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to my talk today. I felt like I rambled through it, but
no, you did.
I'm glad I didn't cancel it because this is an important conversation to have, even with this climate. It's still important to have.
Absolutely. I think Alex has got a question in there. Can you talk about more about representation in games? I can do it from a female perspective, definitely. And I'll let Tina speak from her perspective as well. I'm a gamer, definitely. As I've told several people in a couple of my talks, I have that Viking shield there. I'm looking forward to Assassin's Creed Valhalla because for the first time, an Assassin's Creed game is having a solely female character. Well, I guess it's not the first time because I think you could do it in Odyssey or one of them. It's really hard for me to get into games that I enjoy because there's no female character, right? I wanted to play Watch Dogs, but I don't resonate with that character as a lead. I don't see something out there that I could be, right? And so I struggle to find games I want to play because I'm not in them, right? I'm not there. So I play stuff like Horizon Zero Dawn. I play Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. I play Assassin's Creed Syndicate has been one of my favorite. And once Valhalla comes out, I'm full-on female Viking. So Horizon Zero Dawn is awesome, and I love that one because I can play it. My daughter is also a gamer. She's 10.
My daughter, 9, she's into gaming.
She's into gaming too, and she picked up Horizon Zero Dawn, and she's playing it. And that's a game I don't mind her playing because one, it's not over-the-top violence or anything that she can't see, but it's also a strong female lead, right? So it's so hard to find a game that I want to enjoy playing because I'm not represented in them.
Yeah. Even in games like Roblox or even Gotcha Life, it's hard to find skin tones that even look like us. Like it's hard to match up our skin tones. Even with when the emoji keyboard first came out, before it had the diverse colors, it was only white skin. And everybody doesn't, even before it was yellow, it was only the white skin, and they changed it, of course. But Alex, outside of the sports games, like outside of 2K, which is the basketball game, or Madden, you're not going to find a lot of people of color in games. And our people of color make up a lot of the gaming industry, but the game developers aren't there. So like anything else, you're going to design something that looks like you. So if there's no people of color, if there's no women on these gaming boards, we're not going to be represented. So like I say, my daughter, she likes to play Roblox, but it's hard for her to make a character that looks exactly like excuse me, that looks exactly like her because they don't put in her skin tone shades. And that's something that's overlooked. You may think I'm putting in a palette of brown colored skin tones, but have somebody with the different skin tones so you can have that representation. Because I don't play, like, I like the more the classic games like Asteroids and stuff like that, because it didn't have people in there. So I didn't have to feel like I'm not representing, like I'm not supposed to be playing this because it didn't have anything that looks like. Even like Games of Thrones, there's not, I don't think there are any black characters in Game of Thrones, but I like the show. But if you're looking at something that nothing ever looks like you, it's hard for you to stay intrigued with it. So it's just, there's just not enough gamer developers that look like us, which is why we're underrepresented. So.
Speaking of games, I had something else I popped on to say, because everybody needs to hear from more white dudes in this conversation, I'm sure. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Torchlight series, but it's a Diablo-esque, interesting kind of world. I'm a huge fanboy. One thing I noticed with you talking about skin tone, you can pick a range of skin tones. A lot that exist and maybe some that don't, which I really like, because that struck me that, you know, as you're going through character creation, picking your hair and eyes, and or not eyes, but hair and skin, that was something that really did jump out at me, because I haven't typically been able to pick that in any game. So, I mean, that's an excellent point. And it's incremental progress, but I can think of data points where that's getting better. You know, before video games came up, one thing that I was going to say that I thought of earlier, talking about people, you know, maybe paying lip service to diversity and inclusion, but not necessarily making huge leaps. The two things that I've seen, excuse me, in a lot of companies I've been at that probably contribute to it are this tendency to do one thing and then call it a solved problem. You know, make a D&I statement on the website, and then, okay, now that we've got that, we have solved the systemic problem that's gone back 50 plus years, and so we can pat ourselves on the back. And that's not limited to conversations about diversity, because I've seen companies do that with so many things. You know, it's just baked in to such a degree that anytime they bring themselves to have a conversation about any topic, okay, we're done now. And the other thing that I think contributes to that a lot is this stock market thinking of, we have to drive to profits for the next quarter, and anything that we focus on that gets us there is great, but you lose sight of the long term. You know, I know nothing about the internals of the companies that do those air dryers that famously could pick up two skin tones, white or very white, and if anybody with brown skin or darker put their hands underneath, they wouldn't engage, presumably because nobody thought about D&I on the front end and thought, you know, let's maybe do some testing with people who aren't Caucasian. But, you know, it's that very short-sighted, we need to do this one thing. The three people that we have to test with have white hands. Hey, look, it works. And I think, I don't know what a good fix is to that, other than to tell people stop being idiots. But, you know, it causes problems in so many other areas that I see that, and also maybe by pushing those conversations and going into an uncomfortable place, the people who are in the majority could very well be afraid of being judged for what their demographic has done. Like, even though you might be making an effort to include people, or you might be making an effort, you know, to be more mindful of stuff, they're afraid of the exact same treatment as the people who will look at you and think that you don't listen to Green Day. And other than, wow, this is really bad, you know, unfortunately, my fix stops at don't be an idiot. But you know, it's a disturbing trend.
It is, because it is layers, because it does go back so many years, and it's not going to be one quick conversation, and it is going to lead, this conversation is going to lead to that, but we just have to get past the uncomfortable layers. Like, each layer is going to be something different, and we got to, like you were saying, that companies have to make like a full-hearted effort. Don't just have one conversation, or don't just bring in one speaker and call it. Actually have to change the face of the company. And that doesn't mean that you're going to push people out. It just means you're going to make room for other voices. It's going to make room for other people and make that okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with having these conversations, and both parties have to be willing to listen. Like, I have to be willing to listen to you just as much as I want you to listen to me. It can't just be one way. Like, I'm underrepresented, so my opinion is the only thing that matters, which that's not the case either. That's also a problem. Like, we both have to enter a space where we can all listen to each other. And yeah, people need to stop being idiots, and they also have to just bring more people on board. Like, have more panels, have more discussions with people, bring other people in from different walks of life on a regular routine, on a regular basis, not just once a year or once a quarter, or whenever it's a hot topic. Just make a regular occurrence around different jobs. And like I said earlier, it's going to take every level, from the CEO down to the regular people who's working. It's going to take every level of conversations to be had. It's not a quick fix. It may not happen over the next 10 years, but each year has to be moved a bit further. Like, we can't just stay stagnant. It has to go further each step of the way. So, but conversations like these are a start. Just bringing different groups of people together who are free, who are ready to talk on different panels and different boards is always going to be a good thing. So I like these conversations. I agree, Amanda. A lot of the female roles were always the damsel in distress. We always have to lean on somebody, whether it's a fairy tale story, or we always, as women, we always have to lean on a male counterpart in order to feel heard, or in order to feel protected, or something like that. So I agree with that statement. Does anybody else want to come on and talk or anything? Yeah, at least I went to one of the Louisville Makes Games meetups last year during Design Week. Hey, Shelly, how are you?
Hey, good. I think something you all were saying earlier when you were talking about hiring and some of the ways that resumes get filtered out because people might take less traditional routes to get into tech. I think some of the same stuff happens in less formal ways where, you know, I'm only, you know, getting into tech in the last year and a half. I don't have the computer science background. I don't have, you know, I'm not into robotics. I didn't play video games at all growing up. So some of those things are just sort of less formal things that people have in common a lot of times who are already in those spaces. And as a woman, it also aligns on those gender lines, where it's guys who have these things in common, who that's what their conversations revolve around, and then I don't really have a way to connect in those conversations at all. So I don't know, I'm just kind of like talking here, but yeah, that's kind of it's hard to nail down some of those more soft skill things, more just interactional boundary setting that goes on. And I think that it helps if people can be more aware of what, you know, that they're doing those things, be aware that not everyone has those things in common, but they're still, you know, they're still, their career in tech is still valid. They still belong here, even if they don't have those things in common. I think that's pretty important, and it's kind of maybe hard to teach as well to people in the workplace, because it's not just something that management needs to do. It's something that all of your coworkers have to be, you know, working on as well, to increase that feeling of just belonging, that you belong in that space. Because that's one of the, I think for myself at least, that's been, you know, a potential barrier for me, is that, you know, coming into these spaces and feeling like I get boxed out sometimes. I mean, the first workplace that I went to in tech, I was the only female on a team of more than a dozen people. And so there were just sort of those boundary setting things that really made it hard to feel like I belonged.
Yeah, I agree. I'm coming from a manufacturing background. Like, I really got into the tech space a couple of years ago myself. So it's just, it's like you said, it's just having your coworkers having those same conversations, because that's who you're going to work with. So like you said, if you don't feel like you're connecting, if you're lost on a problem, you're really going to feel like you're on the island by yourself, because you're not going to feel as comfortable going to your male counterparts and asking for help, because you already don't feel like you don't belong, or they're not going to take you seriously. So even though they may just be just as lost as you don't want to ask for help, because you don't feel like you're going to really get the help that you need, or you don't know if it's going to harm or hurt you or not, you know? So yeah, I agree. Like, everybody has to play their role in the part. Like, even if it's something simple as hearing a conversation where you know it's not going in the right direction, we all have to speak up and say, you know, hey, that's not right. You know, we all have to take accountability for it. So I agree with you.
Yeah, it's a hard conversation to have too, because it's not like they're doing something wrong by connecting with each other about that thing. It's just being aware that of the ways in which that those helpful kind of bonding in-group things don't become excluding as well.
Yeah.
You
still gotta make a welcoming, like, you still gotta feel welcome, like make people feel welcome, regardless of what you're used to. You still gotta be able to make people feel welcome.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, is just finding ways to make people feel welcome without taking offense or feeling like you're offending anybody. Just, we all got to get through that awkward phase, the first beginning of conversations with people, and just listen to one another. That's what the biggest thing is, just taking the time to actually listen, be willing to change a little bit. So thank you for coming on, Shelly. Thank everybody who's came on and talked, and who showed up. I didn't know if anybody was going to show up to my talk or not, so I'm glad that there were people in here. So thank you everybody for coming and support me today. I like the conversations that we were able to have. I think Louisville Makes Games does a pretty good job of including people. When I went to the meetup, I felt welcomed. I felt like everybody explained the games to me pretty good that they were working on, Alex. So I think Louisville Makes Game does make a good effort to have everybody feel included when you do have the meetups. I think last year they were on Sundays. Of course, this year we can't have them really, but the people who I talked to from Louisville Makes Games, they always invited me out to anytime y'all are having like an open game night or anything like that. But always leave that door open for conversations is how you can have more diverse, Alex. Yeah, education. If you don't have that 4-year degree, or if you haven't been in computer science your whole life, people don't feel like you take it serious, or that it's just a cash grab. And anybody who's wrote any type of program that knows that you actually have to like it. Like, the money, if you're only in the tech space for the money, you're not going to last long, because the hours that you have to go through troubleshooting a problem, or you write so much code and then everything breaks and you realize it's just a bracket, or it's just a curly brace that you forgot to put in. This is something that you really have to have some type of a passion for to really move forward in it. So we shouldn't be put out because the education is not traditional. As long as we know the code stack, we should be able to have an opportunity. But yeah, Chad, it's pretty hard for, I can only speak from my perspective, but being a woman of color coming into the tech space, it hasn't been easy trying to find a job yet. So I'm still looking, but it is, it's very stressful trying to find a job in this space. Thanks, Chad. I felt like I rambled a lot through the presentation, but I'm glad I got it out of the way. Oh, thank you, everybody. I was really nervous, but I'm glad it went pretty good. I'm glad everybody was able to get something from it. I am too, Chad. That really helped me really think about my presentation. It gave me some really good pointers. I'm glad I went to that global diversity back in January. Who knew the whole world was going to shut down a few weeks later? But I'm glad I didn't cancel this. This was needed today. Yeah, I look forward to being able to do more talks when things get back to normal. You have a great weekend too, Alex. Well, everybody have a good weekend. Hopefully Code PaLOusa was enjoyable this year. I know I enjoyed it. I'll see everybody around at different meetups or anybody who reaches out. Yeah, man, I plan on giving more talks. Have a good weekend.